I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own children would laugh at me inside my own house. Dad, stop pretending like you've got anything left. My son Armin said, slamming his coffee cup on the table. The house is falling apart, your business is gone, and honestly, you should just move into a nursing home before you embarrass us further. My daughter, Sarah, didn't even look up from her phone. He's right, Dad. You don't have anything to leave behind. Why hold on to all this junk? Just sign the papers and let us handle things now. Their spouses sat there smirking, whispering behind fake smiles. My daughter-in-law even added, old people never know when to let go. I just sat there quietly, my heart breaking in slow motion. These were the same children I raised with sleepless nights and empty stomachs. I worked 40 years to give them everything: education, comfort, love, and now they were calling me a burden. They thought I didn't notice when they swapped my original property documents for new ones. They thought I wouldn't recognize the signature they'd tricked me into giving, but I knew, and as I sat in that cold, silent living room, their voices echoing like poison in the air, I decided to let them believe their little illusion a bit longer. Fine, I said softly, maybe you're right, maybe I have nothing left. They all smirked in victory, whispering among themselves. My son even said, well, at least you're being realistic now. But that's when the doorbell rang. Our old family lawyer, Mr. Camel, stepped in holding a thick brown envelope. His eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of something powerful there. He placed the envelope on the table, right between my greedy children. I think you all should hear this, he said quietly. Sarah frowned. What's that supposed to be? Mr. Camel looked at me, then at them. It's your father's final will and property trust sealed years ago. The room went silent. My son's smirk faded, and as Mr. Camel began to open the envelope, I leaned back in my chair and said, let's see who really has nothing left. Before all this drama began, I was just a simple man who believed that love could hold a family together forever. My name is Rashid Ahmed, and for over 4 decades, I built my life around my wife and children. I wasn't born rich. I started as a clerk in a trading company back in the 1980s. My wife, Farida, was a school teacher with a smile that could melt away every worry. Together, we saved every rupee, every penny, every dream. Slowly, we built a small construction business, and by the time our children reached high school, we had a few properties, some savings, and a respected name in the community. People used to call me Rashid, by the man who made it from nothing. I was proud, not of the money, but of the fact that I'd never cheated anyone. Every deal was clean. Every worker respected me. My son Armin, born first, was always ambitious, sharp, confident, and quick with words. He wanted everything fast. My daughter Sarah, on the other hand, was gentle when she was young, always reading, always staying close to her mother. When Farida passed away suddenly 10 years ago, it broke me in ways I still can't describe. She was my anchor. After her death, the house grew quieter, colder. I thought my children would fill that emptiness, but slowly they started drifting away. Armin married a flashy socialite named Nita, who believed money defined class. Sarah married Rizwan, a businessman who always talked about smart investments. Both of them had one thing in common: they liked showing off. At first I didn't mind, they were young, they deserved to enjoy life, but soon I started noticing how every conversation turned toward money. Dad, how much is that property worth? Or you should really let us manage your accounts. I didn't realize it back then, but greed had already entered my home quietly, politely, dressed like love. After that night, I tried to convince myself that I'd misheard. Maybe Armin didn't mean it that way. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But over time, the cracks in our family grew too wide to ignore. It started with small things that hurt more than open insults. When I joined them for dinner, Armin would sigh loudly and check his phone, as if I were wasting his time. Sarah, once my little girl who used to braid her mother's hair and bring me tea, now barely looked up from her tablet. She started calling me Dad, in that flat, emotionless voice people use with strangers. I remember one Sunday, I walked into the living room holding an old photo album, the one with Farida, smiling in front of our first car. I thought it might bring us together for a while. But before I could open it, Nita groaned, "Oh no, not another memory session. We've seen those pictures 100 times. Rizwan, my son-in-law, laughed. Uncle, you should digitize those and throw away these old albums. They just take space." I felt my throat tighten. Those weren't just photos, they were my life, my story, every sacrifice I'd made for them. Still, I smiled and said nothing, because when you're a parent, you learn to swallow your hurt for the sake of peace. But peace was the one thing that left my house first. Soon, Armin and Nita started renovating. Parts of my home, moving furniture, changing locks, even throwing away my old armchair without asking. When I protested, Armin said coldly, "Dad, this is everyone's house now. You can't keep living like it's the 1990s. Sarah, too, started hinting that I should relax and let them handle things. I didn't realize that by things, she meant my properties, my accounts, and the business I'd built from scratch. The final blow came one afternoon when I overheard them arguing about me again. Nita's voice was sharp and full of venom. "Why are you hesitating? Just make him sign it. He doesn't even understand half of what he owns. Once he's out of the picture, we can sell everything and finally leave properly." That night, I sat alone in my study, staring at my wife's photograph. Her eyes seemed to ask me silently, "Rashid, what have our children become?" And for the first time in my life, I didn't have an answer. Armin walked into my study the next morning with a cup of tea in one hand and a file in the other. His tone was sweet, too sweet, the kind people use when they want something. "Dad," he said, setting the cup down, "I've been sorting through some old business documents, to help you with your taxes. There's a small form here that needs your signature. Just a formality." I looked at the file, thick and full of typed pages I didn't recognize. "What kind of formality?" I asked. "Oh, just some property management stuff." He replied quickly, "You still own half the land we built years ago, and I want to make sure it's secure. It's nothing serious, really." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. I hesitated for a moment. Something felt off. I wasn't a fool. I'd run a business my whole life, but I also didn't want to show that I doubted my own son. Trust is a dangerous thing once you start questioning it. The whole foundation of love begins to crumble. So I took the pen and signed where he pointed. He patted my shoulder like I was a child. "Good, Dad. Don't worry, I'll handle everything from now on." For the next few days, I noticed changes. Calls from my accountant stopped. Letters from the bank started arriving in Armin's name. When I asked him, he brushed it off. "Oh, they just redirected everything to me for convenience. You shouldn't stress yourself with paperwork." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But one evening, when he and Nita went out, I found a copy of that same file in his office drawer. I opened it, and my heart nearly stopped. Those routine papers weren't tax forms. They were transfer deeds. He'd made me sign over my properties, one by one, including my late wife's house, the one she'd dreamed of her whole life. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. My name, my signature, was everywhere. Legal, final, irreversible. I felt sick, betrayed. When Armin came home later that night, I confronted him. My voice shook. "You made me sign my own life away, Armin. How could you?" He didn't even flinch. He just stared at me coldly and said, "Dad, don't be dramatic. You've had your time, it's ours now." The way he said ours like I was already dead tore something inside me that would never heal again. The next morning, I tried to act normal, though my heart was heavy. I didn't want to believe that my own son had tricked me. Maybe there was some misunderstanding, I thought. But when I confronted Armin again, this time in front of Sarah, the truth slapped me across the face. He didn't deny it. "Yes, I made you sign the papers," he said bluntly, his arms crossed, "because you're not capable of handling things anymore. You forget, you lose track, and honestly, Dad, we were just protecting what's ours." "What's ours?" I repeated, feeling my throat tighten. "Everything here was built by me and your mother. You didn't lift a brick." Sarah, instead of defending me, sighed impatiently. "Dad, please don't make this dramatic. We're just trying to secure the future. You'll still have a place here. We're not throwing you out." Her husband, Rizwan, chuckled from the corner. Not yet, at least. The room went silent. I turned to my daughter, searching for the little girl who used to cry when I came home late from work, but she looked away. That's when I realized I was no longer a father to them. I was an obstacle. Days turned into weeks. The house that once felt alive with laughter now felt like a stranger's property. I wasn't allowed to make decisions, not even about the staff or the bills. They told me to rest and let the young ones manage. My old driver was fired. My office was emptied. They even disconnected the phone line in my study. The final humiliation came when I overheard Nita talking to a guest. "Oh, that's just my father-in-law," she said dismissively. "He stays here rent-free. Old habits die hard, you know." Rent-free. That night, I sat alone on the porch, staring at the gate. The wind was cold, but not as cold as my children's hearts. That's when I picked up the phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. "Mr. Camel," I said quietly when he answered. "It's Rashid. I think I finally need your help." When I met Mr. Camel the next morning, he looked older, but his eyes were still sharp, the same eyes that had once helped me build my first company contract. He listened carefully as I explained everything: how Armin had tricked me into signing the property papers, how my bank accounts were being redirected, how even my own house now felt like a cage. When I finished, he sighed and took off his glasses. "Rashid, what you signed wasn't just a few papers. Legally, they now control most of your properties, but..." He paused. "They made one mistake. They didn't register the final transfer for your main estate yet. We still have a window." I felt a flicker of hope. But before we could take action, the situation at home got worse. That evening, Armin came into my room without knocking. His tone was casual, but his words were poison. "Dad, we've been thinking," he said. "You should move to a care home for a while. You'll be more comfortable there." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're sending me away from my own house." Sarah entered behind him, trying to sound kind. "It's not like that, Dad. It's just, you need medical supervision. You'll have nurses, good food, peace. I interrupted bitterly, "Or convenience." They exchanged glances, and in that silence, I got my answer. Nita stepped forward and handed me a brochure. "It's one of the best nursing homes in the city. You'll love it there." I pushed it away. "I'm not going anywhere." But they were prepared. The next day, when I woke up, my bags were packed. My belongings carefully selected sat by the door. Even my wife's photo frame was missing from the nightstand. Armin stood there with two men in uniform. "They'll drive you, Dad," he said coldly. "You can visit whenever you want." I wanted to scream, to fight, but I was tired of being surrounded by faces that once called me Papa, and now looked at me like a burden. As the car drove away, I looked through the window one last time. My house, the one I built brick by brick, grew smaller in the rear-view mirror until it disappeared completely. In that moment, I realized something cruel but true. Sometimes the people you raise become strangers who bury you while you're still alive. The first night in that nursing home was the longest night of my life. The room smelled like disinfectant and loneliness. The walls were dull gray, and the only window faced a brick wall. I lay on a narrow bed that creaked every time I breathed. An attendant walked in, a young man with tired eyes. "Mr. Rashid, dinner time," he said politely. He placed a metal tray of soup and bread on my table. I stared at it without touching it. Once, people used to wait for me at the dinner table. Now, I was just another old man on a list. I heard the muffled laughter of other residents, some talking to themselves, others staring blankly into space. I realized this was where my children thought I belonged, among the forgotten. For days, no one came to visit, not Armin, not Sarah, not even a call. The staff told me they'd already paid for 6 months in advance. 6 months like they were renting a room for a ghost. But every night, I took out that envelope from Mr. Camel and stared at the bold letters. "Do not lose hope. We're not done yet." Finally, after 3 days, I gathered the courage to open it. Inside was a short letter and a small USB drive. The letter read, "Rashid, years ago, your late wife Farida asked me to draft a separate will, one that no one knows about. You told me never to reveal it unless your children proved unworthy of your trust. I think the time has come. The USB contains digital copies and instructions. I'll visit soon. My hands trembled as I read those words. My wife, even in death, had seen what I refused to see. I inserted the USB into a small, borrowed laptop. There it was, the document titled Private Trust of Rashid and Farida Ahmed. It listed multiple properties, foreign investments, and a total estate value exceeding $25 million, all hidden in a family trust under Mr. Camel's supervision. The transfer papers Armin made me sign. They were just a fraction. The real fortune was untouched. For the first time in months, I smiled, not out of vengeance, but relief. Farida had saved me from my own blindness. I whispered to her photo on my nightstand, "And you always saw further than I did, my love." That night, I slept peacefully because I knew the next chapter of my life wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about justice. Mr. Camel arrived at the nursing home early the next morning, dressed in his usual crisp suit, carrying a small leather briefcase. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "You look better," he said. "I feel better," I replied, for the first time in months. We sat in the corner of the garden, away from curious ears. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a few documents, placing them carefully on the table between us. "Rashid," he began, "Farida was wise. She came to me years ago, after she noticed the way Armin and Sarah had started changing. She said, if one day greed blinds them, protect their father's dignity. That's why we created the private trust." I listened in silence, overwhelmed. He continued, "You officially transferred some properties to your children, yes. But those were minor assets, the smaller plots, the side accounts. The real holdings, the company shares, offshore investments, and the villa were all moved into a trust structure under your name. You're still primary trustee. No one can touch it without your consent." I blinked, stunned. "You mean, after everything they did, I still own it all?" He nodded, "Every last bit." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. I wasn't ruined after all. I had power and the truth. Mr. Camel leaned closer. "Now the question is, do you want them punished or do you want them to understand?" I thought for a long time. Revenge was tempting, but it felt hollow. What I really wanted was for them to see what they had become, to feel the shame of their own choices. I looked at him firmly. I want them to face themselves, and I want it to happen in front of everyone. He smiled. "Then we'll arrange a legal reading, a final will meeting. We'll invite them under the pretense that it's your closing ceremony before shifting the estate. I'll prepare everything." As he stood to leave, I asked quietly, "Camel, why did you still believe in me?" He turned and said, "Because a man who builds with honesty can lose everything except his worth." The letter from my children's lawyer came neatly printed, full of arrogance and legal jargon. "Mr. Rashid Ahmed is hereby requested to relinquish all remaining claims to family assets to ensure smooth succession planning." I almost laughed. Succession planning? They were already planning my funeral while I was still breathing. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. That piece of paper would become the final exhibit in their own undoing. The next morning, Mr. Camel came again, bringing along a young assistant who handled technology and documentation. We spent hours reviewing every clause of the hidden trust. It was brilliant, airtight, impossible to break. The trust stated that upon my retirement or incapacity, all assets would be managed by an independent board of trustees. My children were excluded unless they fulfilled two specific conditions. 1, they had to demonstrate care and support for me during my senior years. 2, they had to prove financial responsibility over a 5-year audit period. Neither condition was even close to being met. Camel smiled as he showed me the documents. "They think they have everything, but in reality, they've just trapped themselves." He then handed me an official notice. "This," he said, "is your formal request to convene a reading of your will. I'll send invitations to your children and their spouses. We'll do it at the law office, make it official." I hesitated for a moment. "They'll laugh, Camel. They think I'm broke." He smiled knowingly. "That's exactly why they'll show up to celebrate your downfall." Over the next few days, he helped me prepare. We updated the trust papers, secured all accounts, and arranged a press announcement about the closing of the Ahmed family estate. It spread through our old business circle quietly, ensuring that word would reach my children through their friends. And it did. 2 days later, Sarah called for the first time in months. "Dad," she said in a voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we heard you're finalizing your estate. Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't think it would interest you," I replied. "Of course it does," she said quickly. "We just want to be there for you." I smiled to myself. "Then be there tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., at Camel and Associates. It'll be a short meeting." After I hung up, I looked out the window of the nursing home. The same dull wall I'd hated for weeks now looked like freedom. For the first time since Farida's death, I felt her presence beside me, proud, calm, and strong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of everything that led me to this moment. I sat by the small window of the nursing home, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, my children were probably celebrating, believing tomorrow would mark the official end of my name, my authority, my story. How ironic. I took out my old diary, one Farida had gifted me years ago. On the first page, she'd written, "When you build with honesty, your legacy will outlive lies." I ran my fingers over her handwriting, feeling that familiar ache in my chest, but this time, it wasn't grief. It was strength. I thought back to every moment that had brought me here. The long nights at the construction site, the smell of wet cement, the laughter of my children when I first brought home ice cream after our company's first contract. They'd forgotten all that, but I hadn't. Early the next morning, I dressed in a freshly pressed suit Mr. Camel had sent for me, navy blue, just like the one I'd worn to my company's first anniversary. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back. This wasn't the weak, broken father they dumped in a care home. This was Rashid Ahmed, the man who built empires with bare hands. When the nursing home van arrived to take me to the lawyer's office, even the driver seemed surprised. "You look sharp today, sir," he said. I smiled. "Today, I bury my past and save my name." The drive to the city felt longer than usual. Every building, every road I passed seemed like a memory flashing before me, reminders of the life I'd created, and the people who'd forgotten what it cost. When we reached Camel and Associates, I saw them standing outside. Armin, Sarah, Nita, and Rizwan all dressed in expensive clothes, laughing among themselves. Armin noticed me first and smirked. "Look who decided to show up," he said. "Hope this doesn't take long, Dad. We've got meetings after this." I didn't reply. I simply nodded and walked past them. Mr. Camel was already waiting inside, the mysterious brown envelope resting on the conference table, the same one from that day in my living room. "Shall we begin?" he said calmly. As everyone took their seats, I looked around the room, the children who had turned their backs on me, the friends I once trusted, and the lawyer who had remained by my side through it all. And for the first time in years, I felt ready. The room fell silent. Even the ticking wall clock sounded louder than usual. Mr. Camel adjusted his glasses and opened the brown envelope with slow, deliberate movements. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, except mine. I was watching my children. Armin leaned back, his arms folded, wearing that smug look he'd perfected over the years. Sarah sat beside him, scrolling through her phone like this was some boring formality. Nita kept whispering something to Rizwan, who was half smiling, clearly expecting their payday. Mr. Camel cleared his throat. "This," he began, holding up a few neatly stapled pages, "is the final, legally recognized will of Mr. Rashid Ahmed." Sarah didn't even look up. "Can we skip the legal mumbo-jumbo, please? We know everything's divided equally." "Do you?" Camel asked quietly, raising an eyebrow. That question seemed to hang in the air for a moment. I saw Armin frown slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Camel set the papers down and looked directly at me. "Mr. Ahmed, for the record, would you like to confirm that the document I hold is indeed your final will, signed, sealed, and witnessed 3 months ago?" "Correct," I said softly. Rizwan let out a small laugh. "Wait, 3 months ago, but you were already in the nursing home then." "I was," I replied, "and that's where I signed it." A hint of unease rippled through the group. Sarah finally put her phone down. Mr. Camel continued, "Let me read the opening clause. To my beloved children, may you remember me not for my wealth, but for my choices. What I leave behind is a reflection of how each of you treated me in my final years." Silence. I saw their expressions shift, curiosity giving way to confusion, then something sharper, fear. Armin spoke first. "Dad, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just let Camel read on. He continued, "My son Armin, who managed the family business, shall receive nothing." The words dropped like a hammer. Armin shot up from his seat. "What? This is a joke, right?" Camel didn't flinch. "My daughter Sarah, who turned her back when I needed her the most, shall also receive nothing." Sarah gasped audibly. "You can't do this. I'm your daughter. My daughter Nita and her husband Rizwan, who saw me as a burden and mocked my age, shall also receive nothing." Rizwan's smirk vanished, and then Camel paused. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. However, he said slowly, looking directly at me. Everyone leaned forward. "There is one more clause. Someone none of you ever expected." Sarah repeated, her voice trembling slightly. Her confidence was cracking for the first time. Armin leaned forward. "Who is it, Camel? Don't drag this out." Mr. Camel glanced at me before replying, almost as if asking permission. I gave him a small nod. He adjusted his glasses again and read aloud, "I, Rashid Ahmed, being of sound mind and full awareness, hereby declare that my entire estate, valued at approximately $25 million, including properties, shares, and liquid assets, shall be transferred to the Rashid Foundation for the elderly charitable trust established under my name." For a moment, no one said a word. Then the explosion came. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Armin shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You gave it to a charity." Sarah's face turned red. "Dad, are you serious right now? After everything we did for you, everything you did?" I interrupted softly. My voice didn't need to be loud. The stillness around it made it sharper. "You left me in a care home and called it space. You mocked me for growing old. You treated my life's work like garbage, and now you want a reward for that." Nita looked at me with wide eyes, tears forming. "We didn't mean it like that, Baba. We were just busy," I said, cutting her off, "too busy counting what you thought would soon be yours." Mr. Camel placed another folder on the table, if I may add. He said calmly, "The Rashid Foundation has already been registered, funded, and operational for 2 months. Mr. Ahmed moved his assets quietly with the full legal backing of my firm." Rizwan's jaw tightened. "You tricked us," he hissed. "You planned this." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Rizwan, you tricked yourselves. I simply watched." Sarah stood up, pacing the floor. "You can't do this. We'll contest it. We'll go to court." Camel smiled faintly. "You can try, Ms. Sarah, but your father's medical records, psychological evaluations, and legal witnesses all confirm he was perfectly sound of mind. Any contest will be thrown out before it begins." Silence again. But this time it was thick, heavy with the weight of realization. Armin stared at me, his face pale. "So, that's it? You're leaving us with nothing." I took a deep breath. "No, son. I'm leaving you with something far more valuable, a lesson." He frowned. "A lesson?" I leaned back in my chair. "Yes, that respect cannot be bought, and it definitely can't be faked." Armin's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. The room was so silent that even the soft rustle of paper sounded deafening. His eyes darted across the first few lines, and I watched as his expression shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally shame. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. "What does it say?" she demanded. He didn't answer at first. He just kept reading until his voice cracked and he finally spoke. "My dear Armin, I built everything in your name, believing one day you'd lead with integrity. But you built walls instead of bridges. You saw my legacy as currency, not responsibility. You forgot that wealth without heart is just emptiness wearing a suit. Still, I forgive you. I only hope you learn what it means to earn something not inherited." Your father, Armin's hand dropped. He stared blankly at the letter, his lips quivering. For once, there was no arrogance in his face, just a hollow ache. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "Dad, we didn't know you'd do all this. We thought you'd always be there." I looked at her and said quietly, "And that's the problem, Sarah. You only thought about what I could give you, not who I was." Nita spoke next, her voice trembling. Baba, we were wrong, please. We can fix this. We'll take care of you, I promise. I smiled sadly. It's too late for promises. What I needed wasn't money or care, it was respect. Rizwan slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You can't just erase your own blood for strangers. Mr. Camel spoke calmly. They're not strangers, Mr. Rizwan. The Foundation already shelters 30 elderly people abandoned by their families' people, just like Mr. Ahmed once was. That silenced him. Sarah wiped her tears, whispering, So that's why you were gone from the home those few days. I nodded. I was setting up a place where no old man or woman will ever feel as worthless as I did. Armin slowly looked up, his voice breaking. Dad, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm sorry. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I walked over to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, Maybe you don't deserve it yet, but the day you stop chasing what's mine and start building something that's yours, that day I'll forgive you. A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't look up. Mr. Camel closed the folder and said softly, That concludes the reading. No one spoke as they left the room. Their silence said everything words could not. 2 weeks after the will reading, I visited the Rashid Foundation for the Elderly for the first time since its official launch. It stood on a quiet piece of land outside the city, the same plot where I had once dreamed of building another factory. Life had other plans and perhaps better ones. The main gate was painted a soft cream color, and above it hung a sign that read, You are home here. The words hit deeper than I expected. Mr. Camel walked beside me as I entered. Elderly men and women sat under shady trees, talking, laughing, playing chess. A few volunteers helped serve tea. The air felt warm not from the sun, but from the sense of belonging that hung around. An old woman with silver hair smiled at me. Are you new here? She asked kindly. I smiled back. No, I'm just someone who understands what it's like to be forgotten. She nodded knowingly. Then you'll fit right in. I spent hours walking around, listening to stories, men who were thrown out of their homes after retirement, women whose children stopped visiting after they were married, grandparents who only existed in old photos. Every story felt like mine, a reflection of what greed and pride can do to love. By afternoon, I sat under a tree with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. Mr. Camel joined me quietly. You seem peaceful, he said. I am, I replied. For the first time in years, I feel like I've done something worth leaving behind. He smiled. You've built more than a foundation, Rashid. You've built forgiveness. I didn't answer. I just looked at the golden sky, where day met night the same way pain meets peace when you finally let go. And for a brief moment, I whispered to myself, Farida, I kept my promise. They may have taken our home, but I gave it back to those who need it most. I turned the envelope in my hands, recognizing Armin's handwriting, bold yet slightly uneven, like a man trying to steady himself after losing everything. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten letter and a photograph. Baba, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I needed to write this. After the will reading, everything changed. The investors pulled out of the company. I lost the office, the cars, even the house. Sarah moved in with friends. She says she can't face anyone after the news went public. Nita and Rizwan are talking about moving abroad. Maybe that's for the best. I used to think I was powerful, but now I realize I was just borrowing your shadow. Without it, I'm no one. I've started working at a construction site again. The same place where you began your life. The men there don't know who I am, and for the first time, I'm learning what real work feels like. If you ever visit the site near the river, I'll be there building something with my own hands. Armin. I stared at the letter for a long time. He sounded broken, yes, but not defeated. And somewhere in that brokenness, I saw a glimpse of the man I once hoped he'd become. The photograph inside showed Armin in a dusty shirt, holding a shovel, his face sweaty and tired, but his eyes. They looked different, softer, humble, human. Sarah, I later heard, had started volunteering at a women's shelter. Nita and Rizwan's marriage didn't survive the storm he left when he realized there was no more money to chase. Nita came back to me months later, quietly asking if she could volunteer at the foundation. I didn't turn her away. Life has its own way of teaching lessons. Sometimes you don't need revenge, you just need patience. One evening, as I sat outside the foundation reading the newspaper, I saw an article titled, "Former Businessman's Family Donates to Rashid Foundation Honoring Their Father's Legacy." It had their photos Armin, Sarah, and Nita standing beside the foundation's new wing. The same people who once mocked me, now helping the very place that saved me. I folded the paper, placed it on my lap, and smiled. Mr. Camel passed by and said, "Seems like they finally understood." "Yes," I said quietly. They lost a fortune but found themselves. A year passed. The Rashid Foundation had grown into something I could have never imagined. The courtyard that once held 10 residents now echoed with the laughter of over 50 souls people who had found a new family in one another. Every morning, I'd walk through the garden with my cup of tea, listening to the chatter of old men debating cricket scores, or the women arguing over who made better chai. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't luxury, but it was home. And that, I realized, was all I ever wanted. One quiet afternoon, Armin came to visit. This time, there was no fancy car waiting outside, no expensive perfume, no pride in his stride, just a simple man in a plain shirt and honest eyes. "Baba," he said softly, "the new roof for the east wing is done. I supervised it myself." I looked at him, the faint smile on his tired face, and felt something loosen inside me. "Good work," I said. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying." I placed my hand on his shoulder and replied, "Then that's all I ever needed to hear." Sarah joined us soon after, helping the residents with their medicine. She no longer wore designer clothes or makeup, just a calmness that came from peace, not possession. Nita organized small events for the residents, often bringing her daughter along, teaching her how to serve tea to elderly. Watching them work, I thought to myself maybe this was how legacies were truly built, not through inheritance, but through redemption. That evening, as the sun painted the sky with gold, I sat under the same tree where I had once felt lost. Mr. Camel visited and sat beside me, smiling. "You've changed them, Rashid," he said. I shook my head. "No, life did. I just gave it a stage." We both chuckled softly, the kind of laughter that comes only when wounds finally turn into wisdom. I looked toward the horizon, whispering the words that had lived in my heart for years. They said I had nothing to leave behind, but now I know the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the lesson people remember after you're gone. I stood, watching my children laugh among the residents, and for the first time, I didn't feel betrayed, I felt grateful. Grateful that pain had a purpose, grateful that respect had found its way home. And as the wind carried the sound of laughter through the courtyard, I smiled and said quietly, "Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too."